Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hey everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It's really tremendous to have your company for another episode of the show. Now, my guest on the show today is Jay Pottenger, and Jay and his wife Chelsea run a business called EQ Minds. And what's really interesting about their business is how they help people through the power of mindfulness and a suite of other tools, not just enhance their performance, but to enhance their happiness, to enhance their joy, to enhance their satisfaction. And through the course of the interview with Jay today, we touched on a lot of different things. We talk about how to cope with change. We talk about what mindfulness is, how to use it, some of the practical tools, the strategies and tactics that are accessible to anyone in the moment to be able to run your business more productively, more enjoyably, and of course, more profitably. And so for those people that think emotional intelligence or mindfulness and all the other tools that surround that are a bit soft or a little bit woo-woo, I want to just encourage you to put that thought aside or discard that misconception, because this is all about how to perform at a high level, how to be the best version of yourself, how to get the most out of yourself, how to get the most out of your team so that you can achieve the things that are really important to you. Now, Jay covers a lot of territory here. Please do have a pen and paper handy because he shares some real pearls of wisdom, some absolute nuggets of gold that if you not just listen to, but actually take notes on and apply in your practice, then I know you're going to elevate yourself to another level of success. So without any further ado, here's Jay Pottenger from EQ Minds. Jay, thanks so much for taking the time to come and hang out with us at the Savvy Dentist podcast, and you're beaming in from the beautiful Gerringong. How's things down on the coast today, mate?
It is wonderful. The water is absolutely freezing. I had a dip this morning, but the sun is shining, so it's a wonderful day here.
How did you find your way into doing work around, performance and around optimizing energy and working with, all the different people that you work with, whether you're speaking or whether you're doing workshops? How did you find your way into that world?
Yeah, well, it certainly wasn't a linear path, and there was lots of zigs and zags, and I got sort of dragged into some and pushed into some. But basically, I started off wanting, like lots of kids, especially in Australia, wanted to be a professional athlete. And I was okay. I did pretty good and made a few of the different teams along the way. And during university, my parents would be into studying, so I had to go to university while I was trying to make it as a professional basketball player. So I spent a couple of years doing that, trying to make the team that was near my university, and quickly realized that I was never going to be a great player. And like we do when we're young, sort of start looking at the dollars, thinking that it's all about investing in our wealth. Whereas when we get older, it's all about investing in our health. Yes. But we need to, have a few more notches under our belt before we realize that. And so I started off as an economist and, accounting and finance. And so I worked in banking for a while after my basketball career sort of sidelined. And I did that for a while and everything was going along swimmingly. And then we had a beautiful little girl, but with that came some pretty severe postnatal depression for my wife.
I'm sorry.
And that completely threw things off track for a time. And as part of that, my wife, we both had corporate careers. We were both doing pretty good in the corporate world. And she decided that it was time for a big change. And so she'd learned all of these amazing strategies as part of her recovery process in the space of mindfulness and psychology. And she went back to uni and studied postgrad in psychology. And from that, she started our little business called EQ Minds, and that was back in 2016. And in the meantime, I was working in the corporate world, doing pretty good. And then I had my own sort of, let's call it a trauma, if you want to call it that. And basically what happened was I blew out my back. It was an old basketball injury. And really for 2 years of my life, I was completely sidelined. I was laying on a lot of floors, hanging out with a lot of neurosurgeons, and I couldn't get better. But I was really lucky because I was accepted into a clinical trial at Neuroscience Australia. And they went about treating my mind rather than my back to fix this injury that I had. And it turned out I'd created these fake pain pathways in my brain, which was saying I'm still injured, I can't get better, where the injury had actually resolved itself. And so, yeah, again, I went through this clinical trial, and a lot of it was around mindfulness. And I was very fortunate because at the end of it, I made a full recovery. And that sort of opened my eyes up to this whole space around neuroscience and mindfulness. And I got super interested in it. And then a few years later, I went back and studied neuroscience and mental health, and then joined my wife's company. And so we're very fortunate now, after starting off on, both being in the sports world and then in the corporate world. And then now we get to sort of overlap all of those different attributes to say, hey, how do you want to be a high performer? Here's some amazing strategies that exist in mindfulness and neuroscience and psychology, and then applying that practically into the corporate world and into small business world as well.
I want to ask you a little bit about basketball for a minute, because I always think that even though things may not have worked out in one area there, the lessons that you learn as a sportsman or from whatever else, they're often carried forward with you into your subsequent careers. And I'm curious to ask, what has basketball given you in terms of, is it mindset? Is it an ability to live a healthy life? Or how has basketball benefited you in your life beyond playing the game itself?
Oh, I think it still resonates in my life every single day. And it's such a great skill, whether it be basketball or any sport or any, teamwork orientated activity. It gives you so many different skills that you can apply into your work life and your personal life. And I was really lucky. My parents were, mad into basketball, especially my father, and he got me into it in a very young age. And so you start learning about how do you interact with other people? How do you build teamwork? How do you become a leader? How do you have discipline and accountability? And then also, how do you sort of take care of yourself and have goals, whether it be within the game or outside of the game? And so all these skills are, I think, very, very important skills that apply to your working life and your personal life and your relationships and your family. And so I'm just so very blessed that I was brought up in that environment that was given all those opportunities to really pursue, and especially, my dad was a pretty good coach, and so he certainly gave me a leg up, and that gave me lots of opportunities to travel across Australia and across the globe as well, meeting just some amazing people and getting so many different opportunities that, again, I was very fortunate to be part of that.
Yeah. And then, of course, you go and become an economist, which sounds almost the antithesis of being a sports person in a sense. There's one career that's, obviously structured in its own way. Basketball and sports, elite sports is often quite structured. But then you go to economics, which I actually find really interesting and fascinating. But if I was young, I don't know that I would have understood how interesting and fascinating it would have been. But as an older person, I've come to appreciate it. What is it that you learn as an economist and when working in that corporate space? How does that influence the work that you do now?
I studied economics and then went into finance and banking, because there's only probably 5 or 6 economics jobs in the entire country. So I was working in banking and in investments and a variety of different roles in that space. And I tell you what they did teach me. They taught me all about risk and how to review risk. And it probably helped me miss out on many, many opportunities to invest in the property market, because you understand risk and then realize that you shouldn't understand risk. You should just actually have a crack at things, and you probably be far better off. But it does teach you sort of frameworks around how to analyze things, whether, the pros and cons of things and what the different outcomes can be. And I think that has been important for certain things. Although, again, we do need to be mindful that sometimes you just have to get in and, all the analysis in the world just leads to paralysis, and sometimes you just need to go with your heart and let it override your mind a little bit in certain aspects of our life.
Look, the reason I ask those questions is because I'm always interested in how those things shape the work that you do, because talking about a high performance environment, you can look at it from lots of different angles, lots of different perspectives, and we all bring a bit of ourselves to what we teach, what we work on, and so on. And so I'm always curious to ask people about what it is they're bringing to their work, because I think those influences carry through. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about high performance for a moment, because I really think that people in business today, the environment in which we operate is changing. Certainly, being able to keep abreast of everything as it does change, whether it be from a technological point of view, whether it be from a social point of view, an economic point of view. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about managing change, but not so much from the sense of externally, this is how I work with my team. I'm talking about the emotional regulation that comes with change, because change creates uncertainty. Uncertainty can create doubt and fear and all those other sorts of things. And as you said, we can get into this analysis paralysis sort of exercise. So from the point of view of the phrase that the only constant is change, we've got AI going on, we've got all this stuff happening. How is it that business owners need to think about change? Because it feels like it's almost impossible to keep up with, because it's changing so quickly. Now, I don't know if that's just me saying that, and maybe it's my own head junk, but it feels like there's a lot happening at the moment.
Yeah, and I think we hear that from so many of our different clients, that the pace of change just continues to get greater and greater. And if you do not lean into change, you will be changed eventually. So it's better to be on the front foot and actually lean into that change rather than getting dragged through it, because then it's just going to be a far worse outcome. But I guess going back to the question around high performance, one of the things I really noticed coming out of the athletic world into the corporate world, and I think this applies to change as well, is often when we start working in, let's call it the real world, we look at simply the occupation or the task that we have, and we forget about that we're a whole person, and that there's all these other influences that impact our performance, and especially our high performance. So we arrive at work and go, okay, now I'm going to flick the switch and I'm going to be a high performer, but I'm going to leave the office and I'm going to unflick that switch, and everything I do outside of the office doesn't have a big impact on what I do in my occupation, which is just completely the worst way to look at it. Because, especially now with work-life balance, I mean, what is that? Everything is so integrated together that it's really important. If you want to perform better at work, well, then you have to be a high performer outside of work, right? You have to be sleeping well, you have to be eating well, you have to be taking care of your relationships, your mindset, all of that stuff. And I think as an athlete, they do a really good job of looking at all of the things that impact your performance. And then we go into the business world, and many times we only look at that one part of our occupation, and we don't look at the entire apple or whatever you want to call it. So when it comes to change, then, are you making sure that you're taking care of everything else that goes around that change, rather than just focusing on the change itself? And what I mean by that is, let's say, there's a lot of change going on at your work. Your ability to be able to manage that change is going to be severely impacted if you are not sleeping well. Because if you're not sleeping well, then your emotional regulation will be out the window, your productivity will be declining, your ability to focus will be worse. You're probably more likely to have times where you're more emotionally sensitive. So how are you taking care of all of the other things that go around that change so that you can actually manage, because change is stressful for people. What can you put in place to manage that stress and move forward in the most and give it your best, rather than be impacted by all of these other things that are externally contributing to your ability to manage it?
I think it comes back to I think you're talking about locus of control to an extent, right? We can control the controllables, which is how we sleep, how we eat, how we take care of ourselves. And I really love that, because sometimes, certainly for me, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, sometimes I give too much control away to the external situation and feel you forget the things that you do have under your control. If we're to talk about high performance, some of the things you've spoken about a moment ago, the things that are in our control, it could be habitualized to an extent: sleeping, eating, taking care of ourselves. So if we're looking at the habits that allow us to not just cope with change, but to perform well in our personal environment, in our work environment, what are some of the things that as an athlete you learned that would be really useful for business owners to be able to take into their day-to-day as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And habits really are everything when it comes to our performance, because when we get stressed, we go back. Often our habits and our behaviors change. But if you've got those really solid habits in place, they're that great fundamental foundational base that we can use to fall back on and make sure that we're pushing forward in the right direction. So when it comes to, I have a small business, there's a lot of pressures that come with that. It's not just your actual job, it's all the things that come around having that job that people don't see, the bookwork, making sure the sales is working, all of the other, managing the people, all of those external things really are where a lot of the stresses come from. It's not the actual specific job itself, which I can only imagine applies to your audience in a big way. So in terms of habits, I think it really comes back to, and lots of people know this, it's really, I guess it's simple, it's not easy, is that making sure that you're getting adequate sleep every night. Do you have good sleep routines in place so that you can have quality sleep? So then, are you eating well? Are you waking up and you're having the right types of foods to fuel your body, whatever that may be? And there's a million different diets, that are out there. Finding the one that resonates with you, finding the one that you can actually apply on a consistent basis, whether that's keto or Mediterranean or whatever it is, finding the one that you can actually do is going to help you, especially when times get tough. And then making sure you have good, healthy habits when it comes to exercise as well. Are you getting up in the morning and are you going outside? Are you getting light in your eyes? Are you doing some movement? Or are you waking up in the morning and you're picking up your phone and you're starting your day off stressed straight away by, looking at the news, because that always makes you feel fantastic, or, checking your emails and getting an email from a client that's super triggering. So why would we start our day off with stress when we can start it off, doing something that's nourishing for our brain? So the fundamental basics are super important. And then setting up these little micro habits that you have throughout your day to make sure that you are feeling your best and your energetic best. And I think a lot of that, and there's some fascinating research that's come out around making sure that we have regular breaks. Now, you would be able to share with me a lot more about it than I'm, than my expertise in your space. But it would appear to me that, time is a real pressure that many dentists face.
Yeah, it is. You
go in and that's this constant, triggering every whatever time period it is that you've got your next client coming in to see you, you're on a real time deadline. And when it comes to stress, one of the biggest issues for stress is time pressure. And so automatically you've got this time pressure that's being applied to your day. So how do you then manage that time pressure throughout the day? And I would presume, and again, you can correct me on this, that it's just back to back to back to back to back. And whenever you get a break, you then have all of your different staff asking you questions, wanting you on the spot. Maybe you need to pick up the phone or check your emails, make sure that's up to date. And then you shove something in your face really quickly. Maybe you have a glass of water if you even have time for that. And then you're back into it. And you think, well, I had my break, but I actually haven't had any form of break. I've just been getting more stress on top of my already busy and probably stressful day. So how do you make sure that you're putting in these little breaks throughout the day to make sure that you're really hitting the reset and nourishing your brain so that you can perform at your best? If you think no breaks during the day is a great way to generate revenue, it may well be for a short period of time, but there's going to be long-term consequences for that, not only for your profit, but probably your error rates, and probably most importantly for your mental health as well, making sure that you feel good.
Yeah. And you're right. Dentists face time pressure all day. They're often watching the clock. And when you're trying to get something done, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, when you're trying to hit a deadline, I've got my next patient in the waiting room, I'm trying to finish the patient that's in the chair. If something goes wrong, or takes longer than expected, and then all of a sudden you feel yourself kind of getting more and more wound up as you're imagining this person in the waiting room just getting more agitated as well. It's a really topical thing, and I think one of the mistakes and the fallacies that dentists have, and I'm glad you raised it because I think it gives us an opportunity to talk about it, and that is a lot of people see taking a break as lost productivity. And the mindset shift that needs to occur around that, I think, is a really important one. But it's hard to communicate and hard to impress upon people the benefits of actually taking that break and why it is so important. But you're right. So let's just say you do get a little break. You're absolutely right. You've got team members coming to you because they need answers for this or that. The emails need to be answered. And you're spot on. You have a break in inverted commas, but you don't actually get a break. So I think that's really important. So how do we reframe these actual breaks as to being productivity boosters and being a really positive thing rather than the current frame of it's lost opportunity?
So I think the first thing is actually sitting down, taking a moment, obviously not during the middle of the day because you're very busy, but having some time to reflect when you actually can, and maybe the Christmas period's a good time to do that, and say, okay, so how are the productivity levels across the practice? But more importantly, how are the energy levels across my staff and how am I feeling? It's not just all about, the dollars or generating that revenue. It's how am I actually feeling through the day? Am I enjoying this process? And if your energy is great, everything's humming, well, don't change a thing. But if you're consistently stressed out, if you feel these pressures are just getting too much and overwhelming, then what can we do to make some changes? And there was a fascinating study done by Microsoft Human Factors Lab. Now, it wasn't done on dentists, it was done in the corporate world, but I'm sure we can apply the same principles to it. And what they did is they got EEGs and they placed them on, and it was only a small group of people, people's heads to measure their brainwave activity over a 2-hour period of back-to-back meetings.
Yeah.
Now, as dentists, I'm sure you are going for longer than 2 hours without taking breaks.
Yep.
And so what they found is that during that period, no surprise, there was a fair consistent level of stress. They then got the same group and they had them take 10-minute breaks every 30 minutes. Now, during this, they used a mindfulness and meditation break. We live in the real world. We're never going to take a 10-minute mindfulness and meditation break every 30 minutes. But what you can do is just hit the pause button, go and grab a glass of water, maybe go for a walk around the block. It doesn't have to be every 30 minutes, but it does have to be at some regular intervals throughout the day. Is it 30 minutes? Is it an hour, 2 hours? Whatever it is, there needs to be regular breaks. And what they found is during this study, those people that didn't take breaks, no surprise, they face more stress. But more importantly, their ability to focus on the task at hand fell off a cliff. So whilst we actually think we're doing the right thing, we're pushing through, what's happening to your error rate or what's happening to your productivity if you are not taking breaks throughout the day? And maybe you record that in your dentistry practice, or maybe you just sort of understand how you're feeling. But we need to really recognize that you're probably not at your best if you're not taking regular breaks. So that's the first part, is around understanding that. From there, it doesn't have to be these huge breaks. It's just inserting, maybe it's just a 2-minute break where you go into one of the side rooms and you do 2 minutes of deep breathing, or maybe you do a 5-minute meditation, or maybe you literally just go for a walk around the block where you're not picking up your phone, you're not taking any calls, you're not taking questions, you're literally just hitting the reset button so that you can then walk back in and that next patient gets the best version of you, rather than someone that is time pressured, stressed, and wanting to just push that person out the door to make sure that they get back on track.
I think from a tactical point of view, that's really, really useful. And so, ladies and gents, if you're listening to this, again, please write that down, because I think what Jay has shared with you is actually not just really good sense, it's really powerful. And I think what will happen is the old story, the wood chopper. When do you stop to sharpen the axe? Do you keep chopping with the blunt axe, or do you stop and sharpen the axe? And my contention, and I think Jay's is as well, is you got to stop and sharpen the axe. Otherwise, your productivity will fall away, and your mental health will fall away, and the patient experience will fall away, and all those things. So, Jay, one of the things that caught my attention when you were sharing your story before was the injury you had to your lower back and how you went through that clinical trial and the researchers found that you'd created some fake pain pathways in your brain. And it's made me think about a couple of different things. One, it's made me think about the interface between the body and the mind and what that really looks like, or even if it is an interface, it's just all one thing. My other question around that is around expectations and, when we're expecting good things or bad things, how they come to be. So I wondered, in the work that you do, helping people with their energy, with their, performance and so on, I wonder if you can speak to a couple of those things around, the mind-body interaction, as well as anything about expectations.
Well, so true, because when we face different things in our life, whether it be a stress or a challenge, our body often responds in the same way. So you think about when you're nervous about something, how does that body respond? Whether you're sweaty, whether your heart rate goes up. And then when you're excited about something, your body has a very similar response. But our interpretation of that will largely determine the outcome, whether it's a positive experience or a negative experience. And there's some great work that's been done out of Stanford around when we change our perspectives, we can change our outcomes. And I think it's so really very valuable for us. If I think about, myself, these little challenges that we face throughout the day, and it might be as simple as something, like commuting to work. So I used to hate to commute to work. What a waste of time. I was in my car, stuck in traffic. Seriously, could there be any worse waste of time? And then I had a small child and our household was a jungle. And don't I love that commute? It's the best part of my day, right? 30 minutes to myself to relax. And that simple reframe from I have to commute to I get to commute is such a powerful little reframe that we can use on all different things that we face during our day. Those little stresses or challenges that we face can be so annoying, but is it actually that annoying in the big scheme of things? Is it that big a problem? Or is it actually helping you achieve your goals? And I think when we change our perspective, we can absolutely change our outcomes. And mindset has such an important role in making sure that we're having fun throughout the day.
The other thing that you spoke about as well, and you mentioned it a few times, is mindfulness, sitting alongside mindset. Many, many years ago, I did a course called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, I think it was called, and it was actually one of the very best things I've ever done in my life in terms of managing my own well-being. And at the time, it was a new thing. I'm just wondering if you can talk to the power of mindfulness. I think mindfulness is kind of out in the general world now. A lot of people have discovered it in the time since I first discovered it. And I'm curious to understand why you think it's such a powerful tool. What is it about mindfulness that allows people to focus? What is it that allows people to kind of be in touch with themselves, and how is that benefiting them on a day-to-day basis? What is it about mindfulness that really kind of ticks all those boxes?
Oh, yeah, well, that's a big question and a lot to unpack there. But
yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I mean, there's so many different ways we could tackle that question. And I really do believe that mindfulness is such a powerful tool and probably such a misunderstood tool as well, because mindfulness is really just the intentional use of our attention. But we live in this world where our attention is just constantly fragmented now. There's so much vying for our attention. It's the way we consume all of our information in these little snackable bites, whether it be on our phone or our relationships. And so how do we actually just bring our presence back to the moment? Now, the question, or you said you did the
Mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Yeah, so was that an 8-week course?
Yeah, it wasn't. It was an 8-week course. It was facilitated up in Brisbane when we were living there. And And it was terrific. And at the time, it was really what I needed, and it was very helpful. And we learned about the work of some of the founders of the movement of mindfulness. But I guess the reason I'm asking is because at the time I felt that mindfulness was such a profound thing for me, and I think it is really profound. But at the same time, it feels like mindfulness is spoken about so commonly now that I wonder if we've lost a little bit of the power of it all, or we kind of go, oh yes, mindfulness, and then we move on. Whereas I just want to linger on it for a little bit longer.
So I think a lot of the training that was originally done around mindfulness was actually meditation training. And that's just one little component of it. Whereas mindfulness is a lot broader. Mindfulness comes into every aspect of our life, just being in that present moment. You know, you look at some of the work's been done showing that we are happier when we're in the present moment, and yet our mind wanders about 50% of the time. And of course, we've got this new mind wandering where anytime we have 5 seconds, we pick up the phone and we distract ourselves that way. So when we bring our presence back to the current moment, and there's a whole variety of different tools that you can use to get better at that, meditation being one of those, is just being, when we are present, it's amazing how we forget about a lot of those future problems that we catastrophize about, or we're worried about the next patient coming in the door. We're not actually thinking about what we're doing and the task at hand. Mindfulness is just really centering our attention on the now, which can, since I've started doing it so much more, I've got to say my happiness has gone through the roof. If there's nothing else that should help you try to be more mindful, and there's lots of different tools you can try, just the level of happiness I think is such an important one. When you are in the present moment, it's just been shown that we are so much happier.
What are the other applications of mindfulness that perhaps we overlook as we, get too busy to think about these things? And as you say, we've got to kind of bring our attention back to what we're spending our attention on. How else can we use mindfulness?
Yeah, mindfulness has so many different applications. I think one of the best applications for it, which is commonly overlooked, is just for reducing stress. Because when we're in a state of stress, we mentally time travel. And so that means we're not in the present moment, and we're probably not giving the task at hand our 100%, or alternatively, we make decisions that may well not be the best, and we also become more reactive. And therefore, when you're in this state of stress, maybe someone comes in, asks you a question, and you respond probably not the way that you would like. And maybe if you had your chance again, you would take that back and you would reconsider your answer. And so mindfulness helps with that stress management, and that might be just having a deep breathing exercise that you can use when you're stressed. And there's a million different deep breathing exercises that you can use. I use a simple one called the 4-5 method, but it might be box breathing, whatever it is for you, so that when you find yourself in a state of stress, or you find yourself mind wandering, or you're worried or anxious about something, you just hit the pause button, do a couple of these deep breathing cycles. It brings you back to the present moment, and you can manage stress better. So that's one side of it. When it comes to, you spoke about leadership. Well, leadership is this overarching thing that just touches on so many different things. And to be a good leader, it's incredibly hard. It's complicated. There's so much going on. There's so many different behaviors and characteristics you need to do. Mindfulness is really simple in that it helps you, I think, effectively become a better person as an individual. And again, you can then carry that on into all of these different aspects of leadership. You can become more mindful in your decisions. You can be less reactive when things pop up. You can be able to manage stress. And I think a big one when it comes to not only leadership, but everyone, is our emotions are contagious. And so if you're in a bad mood in the dental practice, guess what? All of your staff are probably in a bad mood as well. If you're stressed, well, then you like to pass that stress on to everyone that's around you. And that's probably going to be, the person assisting you next to the dental chair, or it might even be your client that's picking up these emotions. So mindfulness just helps us center ourselves so we can be in that present moment, not pass that negative energy on, and hopefully pass some positivity and some positive energy on as well.
Yeah. So, Jay, your business is called EQ Minds, and EQ, as far as I'm aware, hopefully I'm getting this right, really relates to emotional intelligence. What else is it around emotional intelligence that you wish small business owners in particular, or people in general, what is it you wish that they knew or appreciated around emotional intelligence that perhaps maybe isn't as commonly held as it could be?
Yeah, well, I definitely think the emotional contagion one is a big one, and that we impact those people around us so much. It's a bit like, don't you love it when a friend calls you up and said, "Oh, I've had the worst day," and you think, "Oh, this is going to be a fantastic 5 minutes of my life." And it's a bit like that when it comes to our emotions in the office. So that's one side of things. The other thing is, I think we can all change, right? Neuroplasticity shows we can continue to change. So just because we're the type of person now doesn't mean that we can't have growth to change us. So if you're thinking, well, I'm not the most positive person in the world, there is lots of things you can do to train your brain to be more positive. Going back to mindfulness, do you practice gratitude? It's been shown that when you practice gratitude, you strengthen a part of your brain called the medial prefrontal cortex to help you become more positive. And so there's little things that we can do every day to help with our growth. We're not in this stagnant set. And I think that's something that certainly lots of people could probably consider as something that might help them, change their outlook on things a little bit.
And change your outlook, and then change your I suppose the effect in your life, right? Like we're speaking about before, expectations and effects, right? So if you can change your outlook, change your expectations, you'll change your life, yeah?
Absolutely. You completely change your happiness as well, which I think is a big one.
Yeah. Jay, we've covered a fair bit of territory today. We've been up and down over a couple of different topics there. Is there anything else that, if we were to capture a few key ideas for business owners as a bit of a bumper sticker that you want to kind of give them a headline or something to think about, what would be a couple of, I suppose, essential truths or even the gospel according to Jay as it relates to this kind of work?
Yeah, so when I was looking into this, some of the mental health statistics that have come out around dentistry it's a little bit scary and it's a little bit concerning. There's not a whole heap of research, but the research that I did see shows that this profession is certainly impacted by mental health in a big way. So I would love for the listeners to just, when they get some time, maybe over a weekend, is to really just take a moment to pause and reflect, do a bit of an energy audit and say, hey, how am I feeling? Am I feeling great? And if I'm feeling great, keep doing what you're doing. But if there's some things I can do to improve my energy, how I feel, my mental health, then maybe there's a couple of little things that we could implement. The first one being is, are you putting those regular breaks in throughout your day? I know it's simple. I know it's not easy. It's actually hard because you're going to have to take that away from somewhere else. But I think just a couple of strategic breaks throughout the day where you're not being interrupted, you're not being bothered, you're not taking any questions, you're putting yourself in a quiet room or going for a walk because exercise is just as good. Do some deep breathing and hit the reset button. I think that would make a huge impact on the way people are feeling throughout the day, and also the way their staff is feeling away as well, because it's not just about you, it's about your staff. How are they doing? So we worked with a big chemist chain, and they actually mandated that people need to put in, I think it was twice a day, a 10-minute walk where they're not allowed to take their phone, because every day they don't get breaks. They're interrupted, constantly doing all this multitasking throughout the day, clients just walking in and out or customers walking in and out of the store. They can't, finish one task to completion. They were mandated to go out and take this regular 10-minute break, and it made a huge difference to the way people were feeling at the end of the day. They weren't completely frazzled out, completely burnt out because they'd had these breaks. And I think something as simple as that, 5 minutes, 10 minutes strategically put throughout the day can really help the way we feel.
Jay, I think this is really important work, and I think it's actually going to become even more important if that's possible. I think it's already, critically important. But as the world continues to change and as technology becomes even more present in our life and things speed up even faster, I think the human brain can adapt and will adapt, but I think having it adapt in a healthy way and cope in a healthy way is going to be key. And the work that you're doing along with your wife, Chelsea, is really, really powerful. And I think, I'd encourage anyone listening to this podcast to check out the work that Jay and Chelsea do. It's incredible, and it's life-changing, and it's in some cases life-saving work too. And so I'd really encourage you to head across to EQ Minds and check out the resources there. There's a white paper you can download to read through. There's a bunch of resources there as well, and I'd commend those to you because this is a big topic, and we've really only been able to scratch of the surface, really. But it is one of those things that is multi-layered, multifaceted, and again, Jay, I know there's lots of things we could talk about, and I really want to thank you for sharing those insights with us. So it's been really, really, really helpful.
Oh, thank you so much for having me along. And obviously, dentistry has a very special place close to my heart because of my family. Please keep up all the work you guys do because it really is important. It's actually been shown that, good oral hygiene is very important for people's mental health. So there's a close relationship there. So very important work.
There is indeed. Thank you, mate. And let's catch up again soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. For more episodes, go to drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist. And to discover how to build a high-performance dental practice, visit drjessiegreen.com and download the free report.